Okay, so at the end of the last video, I posed a question to the small but mighty following of this channel to decide what we looked at this video. And the votes that I got were unanimous. Everybody wanted to see this. This is the Reverend Meshell Ndegeocello Fellowship Bass. And Meshell Ndegeocello is a pretty important player to me. She's a lot of the reason that I picked up the instrument. I heard her bass line on John Mellencamp's version of Wild Nights, and it blew me away, and I had to figure out what it was. I was already interested in playing at that point, and that's what geared me towards the bass, and the rest is history. But this instrument is really cool. It's kind of a blend of two pretty popular designs. This is the Reverend Thundergun platform, very reminiscent of another popular design. It has the center ridge like you would expect to see, has a similar shaped pick guard. It is a set neck, and it has the tilted back headstock that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Electronically, it's very much a P-style bass. It has the split coil pickup, a volume, and a tone. And yeah, so the cool thing about this pickup, yeah, that's a blade pickup. You don't really see that on many production model basses. Reverend does all their own pickups, so it's proprietary. There are other P-blade pickups out there, but this, to my knowledge, this is the only one that I know of that comes on a production instrument. And it's really cool. What it really amounts to is it's a smaller magnetic field, which gives you a tighter response. And to me, what it all boils down to is that this is a more modern sounding P-style bass. I will say that I had flat wounds on this, and I think it just sounded weird with flat wounds. But once I put rounds on it, it opened the thing up. It sounds so good. I used a thicker gauge of round wound string than what I'm accustomed to, and yeah, I'm really happy with the results. It has a great slap tone that we're going to get to later on in the video. But to start, this is how I typically run this in pretty much every P-style bass, is with the volume all the way up, and I always have the volume all the way up on a P-style bass, and the tone at 50%. And the cool thing is, this tone knob actually has a center detent, so when you hit the halfway point, it clicks. So I can get to that sweet spot, really quick on the fly if I'm getting ready to go on. And yeah, so this is with tone at 50%. Very balanced sound, good lows, smooth out high end, and plenty of punch to get through the mix. Now, if you're doing reggae or some neo soul type thing, you might want it to be a little bit darker. So if you roll the tone knob, this is with the tone knob rolled all the way back. So tone at 0 if you want a number for it. Very, very dark sounding, but still articulate. You can still hear the notes very well. A lot of times when you roll the tone knob all the way off, it gets so muddy and undefined that it's really not usable. And the tone knob on this bass is usable in all settings. So say I'm playing in a big band, or I'm just every room has its own acoustic qualities, and I'm just in a naturally bassier room. I want to cut through better. You can crank the treble up. One of my favorite bassists, Donald Duck Dunn of Blues Brothers fame, if I can not knock the light off the ceiling, he used to call it the room full of boom. So when he played live, he would crank his treble up all the way, and then he would dial it back in the studio. So this is with the treble all the way up. So I wanted to do some little chord things just so you could hear the articulation. This is a very articulate bass, and even on that little fast part, you can still hear all that. You can hear all those ghost notes and everything, and it's not overpowering. I really like the tone knob on this bass. It's one of the better ones, and it really comes. It's everything, you know. It being still have definition. It's still having the definition when you roll the tone all the way off. That's huge for me. I like that a lot, and I don't like having a bunch of options when only some of them are usable. So whatever combination they did with capacitors and all that, it works very well on this bass. It has I really like the tone knob on this bass. So the other thing about this thing is it has the best slap tone of any P-style bass that I've ever owned. That's across all the price spectrum and all that. So this is a little... Very, very good slap tone. Typically, I like a J-style bass for slap. This right now is probably one of my, if not my favorite for slap style. I don't do a lot of slap style, but when I do, this is going to be the one I pick up for it. Now, as far as the build goes, like everything Reverend builds, I've had a lot of Reverend products. I've played in bands with guitarists that use them, and everything is extremely well built. And these are built in Korea by a company called Mer Music, and they build for a few different companies, but everything I've ever seen that's been built by Mer Music has been fantastic. Something huge for me is the grade of electronics used on instruments. I usually end up gutting more budget-friendly basses. I usually end up gutting the electronics and switching it out. You don't have to do that with this. You have the higher grade potentiometers, orange drop capacitors, switchcraft jack, all the things you would like to see. It's a very quiet bass. Right now you don't hear any buzzes with it or anything, or at least I don't in my monitor. And yeah, that's huge for me. That's absolutely huge for me. Another thing about the electronics is that they routed you a nice big spot back here. If you do want to get crazy and turn this into an active bass, you can do that without, the only thing you have to route for is a battery box and maybe drill for the knobs, and that's it. They already have the big channel routed back here. The hardware, we have hip shot tuners, which best in the business. And this bridge is pretty common on overseas made instruments, but it's a great bridge. It stays in tune very well. It's a Delrin nut, so like a synthetic bone, pretty much. All high grade stuff. And this finish, it doesn't really show up in here, but it's a nice metallic white. It's a pearl white or whatever, but it has a bit of metallic flake in it. And I don't see any imperfections in the finish whatsoever. You have the block inlays, the binding. It does have a painted neck. So some people don't like painted necks. It's not a deal breaker for me. And the dimensions of this neck are really, really good. The thing plays itself. You can get the action as low as you want, which is another big deal for me. And yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good about this instrument. So yeah, the verdict on this is that pretty much every Reverend I've ever picked up is a winner. You should check them out. They're doing a lot of cool bass designs right now. They're really taking some risks, and I've tried them all. I had the opportunity to try them all at NAMM, and they are all great sounding instruments. So Reverend's a great company. This is a great instrument. Thank you. Like, subscribe, blah, blah. Invite 50 of your closest friends to do the same. And thanks again, and we'll see you next time. So I definitely forgot the other part I wanted to talk about. And I bet you think I'm the kind of guy that's just going to tag it on the end of the video and not bother to reshoot. And you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I'm going to do. So there is one area that the only negative thing I can say about this bass comes with the headstock. So the tilt back headstock is nothing new. So you see as it sits flat, how far back it tilts, right? That makes this a very weak point. If this bass falls, this part's definitely going to hit the ground, and it'll probably break right here if it breaks. Very, very common on older instruments that have this design to have a broken headstock at some point. Not a huge deal usually. They will just glue it, and then once they glue it, it's stronger than ever. But what a lot of companies have done is they've started doing a volute, however you say it, right here, and it's basically just reinforcement. It looks like a little bump. I have another base here with a tilt back head that has the volute. Let's be safe here. All right. So this base has a volute, and you can see it just looks like a little bump on the back. And what that is it's just reinforcement. If that thing ever falls, it's significantly harder to break it. So that's really it. It's not a huge deal. It obviously didn't stop me from buying the instrument. It's take care of your stuff. You know, if it happens, it's repairable. It's not, you know, it's not time to go buy a new instrument or anything. You can get it fixed. So just be mindful of that. If you do decide to purchase one of these, you can get a really good deal on the used market for these right now. And the white's kind of hard to find, but you usually see them in matte black, which is also a cool color. But thanks again. Like, subscribe, blah, blah. See you later.